Daniel Martinez had been a firefighter for 15 years, and he'd learned to read smoke the way other people read books. The black plumes rising from the two-story Colonial on Maple Street told him everything he needed to know. Electrical fire, multiple rooms involved, spreading fast. It was 2:37 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. Not ideal conditions for a house fire in suburban Connecticut. Dispatch, Engine 7 on scene at 428 Maple Street. Two-story residential, heavy smoke showing from second-floor windows. Establishing command. Daniel spoke into his radio as the truck pulled up, his crew already moving with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Garcia appeared at his shoulder. Neighbors say there's a woman inside. Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, lives alone. They haven't seen her come out. Daniel's stomach tightened. Occupied structure fires were every firefighter's nightmare. Where was she last seen? Bedroom, second floor, northeast corner. The house belonged to Sarah Mitchell, a woman Daniel knew from the community. She worked as a librarian at the Bridgeport Public Library, volunteered at the food bank, kept to herself mostly since her divorce 2 years ago. He'd met her once at a neighborhood BBQ. Quiet, kind, had complimented his daughter's softball uniform. Martinez, Jennings, Parker. "You're going in," Garcia ordered. "I want you in and out in 10 minutes. House is old, structural integrity is questionable." Daniel pulled on his breathing apparatus, checked his oxygen levels, and grabbed his thermal imaging camera. Beside him, Jennings and Parker were doing the same, moving with the calm urgency that came from years of training. The front door was already hot to the touch. Daniel kicked it in, and they were immediately engulfed in smoke so thick it was like walking through black cotton. Visibility was maybe 6 inches even with their flashlights. The thermal camera showed hot spots throughout the first floor. The fire had originated in the basement, probably the electrical panel, and had spread upward through the walls. "Stay together," Daniel called out, his voice muffled through the mask. "Watch for flashover." They moved through the first floor quickly, checking rooms, finding them empty. The stairs were at the back of the house, already showing damage. Daniel tested the first step. It held. They started climbing, staying to the outer edges where the structure was strongest. The second floor was worse. The smoke was denser here, heat radiating through the walls. Daniel could hear the fire roaring somewhere below them, eating through the house's skeleton. They had minutes, maybe less. "Northeast bedroom," Daniel said, orienting himself with the thermal camera. The heat signature was confusing, hot spots everywhere, but also what might be a body in the far corner of the indicated room. The bedroom door was closed, which had probably saved Sarah's life by slowing the smoke. Daniel felt it, warm but not critical. He opened it, and fresh smoke billowed out. Inside, the room was a maze of heat and darkness. "Sarah Mitchell, fire department, call out if you can hear me." No response. Daniel swept the room with his camera, and there, in the corner between the bed and the window, a human-shaped heat signature, not moving. "Got her," Daniel called to his team. He moved forward, navigating around furniture he couldn't see, guided only by the camera's display. His knee hit something, the bed frame. He adjusted, moved around it. The floor beneath him groaned ominously. Somewhere below, something collapsed with a crash that shook the entire structure. "Martinez, we need to move!" Parker's voice was urgent. "Floor's compromising!" Daniel reached the corner where the thermal signature showed Sarah. He knelt, feeling in the darkness, and his hands found fabric, a nightgown, then a shoulder, an arm. She was unconscious, limp. He checked for a pulse there, faint but present. She was alive. He radioed, "Victim located, unconscious, but alive. Bringing her out now." Daniel lifted Sarah in a firefighter's carry, draping her over his shoulder. She was small, maybe 120 pounds, but in full gear with limited visibility and compromised structure. Every pound mattered. He turned back toward the door, following Jennings' light. The floor creaked again, louder. A section near the window gave way with a crack like a gunshot, opening a hole to the burning first floor below. Heat and flame shot upward. "Go, go, go!" Garcia's voice crackled over the radio. "Get out now!" They moved fast, but carefully. Too fast meant falling through compromised floor. Too slow meant being trapped. Daniel's lungs burned, despite the oxygen mask. His legs screamed with the effort of carrying Sarah while navigating blind through smoke and heat. They reached the stairs. The top 3 steps were gone, burned through. Daniel had to jump down to the 4th step, jarring impact, Sarah's weight threatening to topple him. He caught his balance, kept moving. The front door was ahead, barely visible through the smoke. Fresh air beckoned. They burst out onto the front lawn just as a section of the 2nd floor collapsed inward with a roar of flame and debris. Daniel laid Sarah on the grass, and immediately the EMTs were there, checking her vitals, fitting an oxygen mask over her face. She was breathing, pulse steady but weak. Severe smoke inhalation, possible burns, but alive. "Good work," Garcia said, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. "You got her out." Daniel removed his helmet, sucking in cold night air. His hands were shaking, the adrenaline wearing off, the reality of how close it had been settling in. Another 30 seconds, and they wouldn't have made it. Sarah was loaded into an ambulance, still unconscious. Daniel watched it pull away, lights and sirens cutting through the night. Behind him, the house continued to burn, his crew working to contain it before it spread to neighboring properties. A neighbor approached, Mrs. Chen from next door, wrapped in a bathrobe, her face streaked with tears. "Is she okay? Sarah, did you get her out?" "She's alive," Daniel confirmed. "They're taking her to Bridgeport Hospital." "Thank God," Mrs. Chen whispered, making the sign of the cross. "I called 911 as soon as I smelled smoke. I tried to get to her, but the door was already too hot. I was so afraid." She broke down crying. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing calling immediately. That's what saved her life, the quick response time." But as he said it, Daniel thought about the timing. They'd arrived 7 minutes after the call. The fire had been burning for at least 20 minutes before that, based on the spread pattern. Sarah had been unconscious in that smoke-filled room. The smoke inhalation should have been fatal. He'd seen victims of smoke inhalation before. Usually, if they were unconscious when you found them, they didn't make it. The fact that Sarah had a pulse, was breathing on her own, that was unusual. Lucky, but unusual. Daniel pushed the thought aside. Right now, he had a fire to finish fighting and a report to file. He could puzzle over the medical improbabilities later. The house burned for another 3 hours before they had it fully contained. By sunrise, it was a blackened shell. The 2nd floor mostly collapsed, the 1st floor gutted. A total loss. But Sarah Mitchell was alive, and in Daniel's job, that made it a victory. Sarah woke to beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. Her lungs burned with every breath, but she was breathing, and that fact seemed important, even through the fog of pain and confusion. A nurse noticed her stirring and came over immediately. "Sarah? Sarah, can you hear me? You're in Bridgeport Hospital. You've been in a fire. Try not to talk yet." Fire. The word triggered memories, smell of smoke, heat, darkness, terror. Sarah tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as her body protested. "Easy, easy," the nurse soothed. "You're okay, you're safe now. You've got some smoke inhalation damage and minor burns, but you're going to be fine. Just rest." Over the next hours, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. Doctors came and went, checking vitals, asking questions she couldn't answer with her damaged throat. Her parents arrived from Boston, her mother crying, her father grim and steady, both of them holding her hands and thanking God she was alive. It was afternoon before she was alert enough to really talk, her voice a harsh whisper through damaged vocal cords. A detective came to ask about the fire's origin, but Sarah had nothing useful to tell him. She'd gone to bed around midnight, everything normal. She'd woken to smoke and heat, tried to get to the door but couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Everything after that was fragments, fear, prayer, and then something she couldn't quite explain. "Do you remember how you got out?" the detective asked. Sarah frowned, trying to piece together the broken memories. I was in the corner by the window. I couldn't move. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see anything, couldn't breathe. I remember thinking I was going to die there. And then, Sarah struggled to articulate it. I felt hands. Someone picked me up, carried me, but I couldn't see who. Everything was black. I tried to say thank you, tried to ask who it was, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't see their face. The firefighters pulled you out, the detective explained. 3 of them went in. Martinez, Jennings, and Parker. Martinez is the one who carried you out. I want to thank them. I'm sure that can be arranged. After the detective left, Sarah lay in bed trying to make sense of her memories. The fire was real. Her damaged lungs and singed hair attested to that. The firefighters pulling her out was real. But there was something else. Something in those lost moments, when she'd been unconscious or nearly so, that her mind kept circling back to. She'd been praying. She remembered that clearly. As the smoke filled her lungs and her consciousness faded, she'd been praying. Not formal prayers, just desperate internal bargaining. Please, I'm not ready to die. Please, someone help me. Please. And then the hands, strong hands lifting her. She'd felt so light, so weightless, like being carried by something stronger than human strength should be. But that didn't make sense. Of course, firefighters were strong. They trained for exactly this. Of course she'd felt weightless. She was small, and they were professionals. The smoke had made everything confusing, turned rational rescue into something that felt surreal. Sarah's mother sat beside her bed, holding her hand. The doctors say you're very lucky. Another few minutes and the smoke inhalation would have been fatal. I know, Mom. Do you remember anything about getting out? Sarah hesitated. I remember praying, and I remember hands carrying me, but I couldn't see who it was. Her mother smiled, tears in her eyes. The firefighters. God sent the firefighters to save you. Sarah nodded, but privately she wondered. She wasn't particularly religious. She attended church occasionally, believed in something larger than herself, but didn't have the certainty her mother possessed. Still, lying in that hospital bed, alive when she should be dead, it was hard not to feel that someone or something had intervened. The fire investigator came by the next day with preliminary findings. Electrical fire, started in your basement panel, old wiring, probably decades old. The house was built in 1952, original electrical that should have been updated years ago. No fault on your part, just old infrastructure finally failing. I rent, Sarah said. The landlord handles maintenance. We'll be having a conversation with him about code violations. But Sarah, you should know. The fire started around 2 a.m. based on burn patterns. You called 911 at 2:37. That's a 37-minute gap where the fire was burning before anyone knew. I didn't call 911. I was already unconscious by the time I realized the house was on fire. The investigator frowned. Then who called? The call came from your cell phone. Sarah felt cold. That's impossible. My phone was on my nightstand. I couldn't reach it. I couldn't even see it through the smoke. Well, someone called from your number. We have the recording. A woman's voice said there was a fire at 428 Maple Street, hung up before the operator could get more information. After he left, Sarah asked the nurse for her personal belongings. Her phone was there, in a plastic bag, along with her singed wallet and the melted remains of her watch. The phone was smoke-damaged, but still functional. She checked the call log. There it was. 2:37 a.m. 911 call. Duration 0.19 seconds. 19 seconds. Barely long enough to give an address and hang up, but Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she hadn't made that call. By 2:37, she'd already been unconscious or near unconscious in the corner of her bedroom, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. She couldn't have called anyone, so who had? Her rational mind said she must have done it during a brief moment of consciousness she couldn't remember, some survival instinct overriding her memory of the action. But it felt wrong. The timeline didn't work. The investigator said the fire started around 2 a.m. She would have woken to smoke shortly after. By 2:37, she'd already been overcome by smoke inhalation, unless she'd woken earlier than she remembered. Unless her sense of time had been distorted by the smoke and fear. unless her memory was simply wrong about the sequence of events. That had to be it. Human memory was fallible, especially under trauma. She'd made the call, gotten back to bed, or collapsed, and her brain had reordered the memories incorrectly. Still, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Or someone else made the call. Someone who wanted to make sure you were found in time." Sarah pushed the thought away. She was alive because of quick-thinking neighbors, because of professional firefighters, because of lucky timing, not because of supernatural intervention. That was the rational explanation, and Sarah had always prided herself on being rational, but lying in that hospital bed, her lungs burning and her mind full of fragments she couldn't quite piece together, rationality felt slippery, uncertain. She'd felt hands carrying her, hands she couldn't see, hands that had felt too strong, too certain, too gentle to be explained by adrenaline and smoke-distorted perception. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard an echo of her desperate prayer. "Please, I'm not ready to die. Please, someone help me." Someone had helped her. The question was who, and why had they saved her, when statistically, medically, she should have died in that smoke-filled room. Sarah was discharged from the hospital after 4 days. Her lungs were damaged but healing, her throat raw but functional, her minor burns treated. She moved back in with her parents temporarily. She had no home to return to, and the insurance process would take months to sort out. The fire department arranged for her to meet the crew who'd rescued her. Sarah drove to Station 7 on a cold December afternoon, nervous about seeing the faces that belonged to the hands she remembered. Daniel Martinez was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a firm handshake that was gentle given her still healing burns. Jennings and Parker stood nearby, both nodding in greeting. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice still hoarse, "for saving my life. I don't have words adequate for what you did." "Just doing our job," Daniel said, but she could see he was pleased. "Glad you're okay. Can you tell me about the rescue? I don't remember much, and what I do remember feels like a dream." They sat in the station's common room, and Daniel walked her through the technical details, the call coming in, the arrival time, the entry into the burning house, finding her unconscious in the corner, carrying her out just before the floor collapsed. Sarah listened, trying to match his account with her fragmented memories. "When you found me, was I responsive at all?" "No, completely unconscious. No pulse response when I called your name. I honestly thought we might be too late until I checked and found you were still breathing. And the 911 call, the investigator said it came from my phone. Did I seem like I'd been conscious enough to make a call shortly before you arrived?" Daniel frowned. "No. Based on the smoke levels and your condition, I'd estimate you'd been unconscious for at least 10, maybe 15 minutes when we found you. Could have been longer. So I couldn't have called at 2:37. Medically, probably not. But Sarah, you'd be surprised what people can do on autopilot during emergencies. You might have made the call, then passed out, and your brain just didn't retain the memory." It was the same explanation Sarah had told herself, but hearing it from Daniel, seeing his professional certainty, made it feel both more and less convincing. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "You've done this before, rescued people from fires. How many times have you found someone unconscious from smoke inhalation and had them survive?" Daniel's expression grew careful. "Why do you ask?" "Because from what I understand, smoke inhalation kills fast. If you're unconscious in a smoke-filled room, your chances aren't good. But I survived. The doctors said another few minutes, and I wouldn't have. So, how lucky was I?" "Very lucky," Daniel said quietly. "Sarah, you're right that the statistics aren't great. Most victims we find unconscious in those conditions don't make it. But you did. Maybe the room's layout protected you somehow. Maybe you were in a pocket of slightly better air. Maybe—" He trailed off. "Maybe what?" "Maybe something we don't understand yet. I've been a firefighter for 15 years, and sometimes you see things that don't quite add up medically or physically. You learn to accept that there are variables we can't always account for. After leaving the fire station, Sarah drove to what remained of her house. The landlord had already scheduled demolition. The structure was too damaged to salvage. She stood on the sidewalk, looking at the blackened shell, trying to superimpose her memories of home onto this ruin. Mrs. Chen from next door came out, bundled against the cold. "Sarah, oh honey, I'm so glad you're okay. I was so scared that night." "Thank you for calling 911, Sarah said. "I heard you were the first to notice." "Actually, I think you called first. I called right after, but when the trucks came, they said the first call had come from inside the house." "From my phone, yes. But, Mrs. Chen, I don't remember making that call." The older woman studied her thoughtfully. "You don't remember, or you weren't able to?" "I don't think I was able. The smoke, the unconsciousness. I couldn't have been conscious enough to dial, speak, hang up." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment. "Then, my grandmother used to say that when we're in dire need, when we call out sincerely, sometimes help comes from unexpected places. She'd say angels walk among us, doing small kindnesses that seem like miracles." "You think an angel called 911 from my phone?" Sarah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "I think," Mrs. Chen said carefully, "that you prayed for help, and help came, however it came. Whether that was divine intervention or remarkable coincidence or something in between, does it matter? You're alive." Sarah thought about that as she drove home to her parents' house. Did it matter? She was alive, definitely. She'd been saved by firefighters, definitely. Everything else, the mysterious 911 call, the hands she remembered but couldn't see, the impossible timing that put her rescue just minutes before fatal smoke inhalation, that could all be explained rationally. Coincidence? Luck? Survival instinct making that call before her conscious mind shut down. Professional firefighters doing excellent work under pressure. But there was something in her chest, some certainty she couldn't articulate or rationalize, that felt like recognition, like gratitude towards someone or something she couldn't name. She'd prayed in that burning room, desperate, simple prayer, "Please, help," and help had come. Explaining the mechanism didn't diminish the result. That night, Sarah sat with her parents at dinner, picking at food, her damaged throat made difficult to swallow. Her mother asked the question she'd been avoiding. "So what now? Where will you live? What about work?" The library's being understanding about leave, and insurance should eventually cover a new place. "I just need to figure out what I want." "What do you mean?" Sarah set down her fork. "Mum, I almost died. I was lying on that floor thinking, this is it, I'm going to die here. And when I came out the other side, when I woke up in the hospital alive, everything feels different now, like I've been given something extra. Bonus time. And I don't want to waste it doing things that don't matter." Her father, usually quiet, spoke up. "What matters to you?" "I don't know yet, but I want to figure it out." Over the following weeks, as Sarah recovered physically, she found herself drawn to questions she'd previously avoided. What did she believe? About the universe? About meaning? About whether her survival had been pure chance or something more? She wasn't religious in the traditional sense. Church had never resonated with her. Formal prayer felt forced. But she'd prayed in that burning room, truly, desperately prayed, and here she was, alive. She talked to her therapist about it, a woman named Dr. Rebecca Santos, who specialized in trauma recovery. "It's common for near-death experiences to trigger existential questioning," Dr. Santos said. "You came very close to dying. That forces you to confront questions most people avoid. I just want to understand what happened, not just physically. I understand the fire, the rescue, but the 911 call I didn't make, the hands I felt but couldn't see, the way everything aligned just exactly right to save me. Do you feel like there's an explanation you need in order to move forward?" Sarah considered. "Maybe. Or maybe I need to accept that some things don't have explanations. That's hard for me. I like answers. I like things to make sense. What would it mean to you if your survival was coincidence, just lucky timing?" "It would mean I'm lucky, that's all. Random chance favored me. And if it was something more, divine intervention, fate, whatever you want to call it, then it would mean..." Sarah struggled to articulate it. It would mean I was saved for a reason, that I have some purpose to fulfill, and I don't know if that's comforting or terrifying. Dr. Santos smiled gently. Maybe it's both. Maybe you get to decide what your survival means. No one else can tell you why you lived. You have to figure out what to do with the life you still have. That resonated. Sarah started volunteering at the hospital where she'd recovered, spending time with patients, offering comfort and conversation. She started attending a support group for fire survivors. She started writing, journaling about the experience, processing the trauma and the mystery and the gratitude all tangled together. And slowly, carefully, she started rebuilding. Not the life she'd had before, but something new, something intentional. She never did figure out who called 911 from her phone. The investigation concluded she must have made the call during a brief moment of consciousness, though Sarah remained certain she hadn't. The mystery stayed unresolved, a question mark she learned to live with. But she never forgot the hands, strong and sure and gentle, that had carried her from darkness into light. Whether those hands belonged to firefighter Daniel Martinez or to something she couldn't name, they'd saved her life. And Sarah had decided that was enough. She didn't need to understand the mechanism. She just needed to honor the gift she'd been given by living fully, loving deeply, and staying open to the possibility that the universe, or God, or whatever forces operated beyond her understanding, might occasionally reach down and catch someone who was falling. She'd been caught, she'd been saved, and she was profoundly, impossibly grateful. 1 year after the fire, Sarah stood outside the rebuilt house on Maple Street. New owners had purchased the lot, demolished what remained of the old structure, and built something modern. Clean lines, big windows, nothing like the 1952 colonial that had nearly been her tomb. Daniel Martinez stood beside her. They'd stayed in touch over the year, an unlikely friendship forged in trauma and rescue. He'd invited her to this moment, to mark the anniversary and see what had risen from the ashes. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked. Sarah considered. "Grateful. Different. Like I'm living a life I wasn't supposed to have. Survivor's guilt? Maybe. But also purpose, I guess. Like I need to make this extra time count." Over the year, Sarah's life had transformed. She'd left her library job to work full-time with a non-profit supporting fire survivors, helping them navigate insurance, find temporary housing, process trauma. She'd become a fierce advocate for updated building codes and working smoke detectors. She'd testified before the state legislature about the need for better enforcement of safety regulations. Her near death had become her mission. "You've done remarkable things this year," Daniel said. "The work you're doing, you're saving lives, Sarah, making sure other people don't go through what you did. I just keep thinking about the girl who didn't make it, Rachel Winters, the one in that other story about mistaken identity. How many Rachels are out there? How many people die in fires that could have been prevented with better wiring, working detectors, faster response times? You can't save everyone." "No, but I can try to save someone. That has to be enough." They walked around the new house, so different from the old one that it was hard to believe this was the same address. Mrs. Chen came out from next door, smiling and waving. "Sarah! And the firefighter, come, I have tea." In Mrs. Chen's warm kitchen, decorated with photographs of children and grandchildren, they sat and drank green tea and talked about the year that had passed. "You look good," Mrs. Chen said to Sarah. "Strong, like you found something you were looking for." "I'm still looking," Sarah admitted. "I still don't understand everything that happened that night." "Understanding isn't always necessary. Sometimes acceptance is enough." Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at it, apologized, stepped out to take the call. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "You want to know about the hands," she said quietly. Sarah startled. "How did you?" "You mentioned it once, in the hospital, when you were still recovering. You said you felt hands carrying you, but you couldn't see who. I've been waiting for you to ask me about it. Do you know something?" Mrs. Chen smiled mysteriously. "I know that on the night of the fire, I wasn't the only one who saw what happened. My grandson Peter was visiting. He's 12, staying up too late playing video games in the guest room. He saw the firefighters go in, but he says he saw someone else too. Who? He said there was a figure in the window, your bedroom window. Before the firefighters arrived, he said it looked like someone was in there with you, helping you. When he told me, I said it must have been his imagination, tricks of the smoke and firelight. But Peter insisted. He said he saw someone carrying you to the corner where the firefighters found you, laying you down gently, then disappearing. Sarah felt chills. That's impossible. I was alone in that room. Was you? Mrs. Chen asked. Or were you alone only in the sense that no other human was there? You're saying an angel moved me. That's Mrs. Chen. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not saying anything. The older woman interrupted gently. I'm just telling you what my grandson saw. What you choose to believe is your business. Daniel returned, apologizing for the interruption. They finished their tea and left, but Sarah's mind was churning. A child had seen something in her window. Could she trust that testimony? Kids had active imaginations, especially in dramatic situations. Smoke and fire created visual distortions. It didn't mean anything, but it meant enough that Sarah found herself researching, looking up cases of rescue, looking for patterns of people who'd survived against impossible odds. She found forums, support groups, collections of stories where survivors described similar experiences, feeling helped when they should have been alone, sensing presence when no one was there, surviving through means they couldn't explain. The medical community called it protective dissociation, the mind creating helpful hallucinations during extreme trauma to provide comfort. The religious community called it angels, divine intervention, miracles. The skeptical community called it luck and coincidence retrofitted with meaning after the fact. Sarah didn't know what to call it, but she knew what she'd felt. 3 months after the anniversary, Sarah received an invitation that surprised her. Daniel Martinez was retiring from active firefighting, taking an administrative position to train the next generation. His retirement ceremony was at Station 7, and he specifically wanted Sarah there. "You're part of my story now," he told her when she called to RSVP. "The saves that work out, those are why we do this job. You're my reminder." At the ceremony, surrounded by firefighters past and present, Sarah listened to testimonials about Daniel's career. 20 years of service, countless rescues, a legacy of professionalism and courage. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he talked about why he'd joined the department, about the calls he remembered, about the ones that haunted him. "We don't always get to know what happens after," he said. "We pull someone out, hand them to EMTs, and that's usually the end of our involvement. But Sarah Mitchell, she's here today, and she's not just surviving, she's thriving. She's making a difference. And that reminds me why this job matters." He looked at Sarah. "You asked me once about the statistics, about how often we find someone unconscious from smoke inhalation who survives. I gave you the professional answer, that you were lucky, that variables aligned. But standing here today, looking at what you've built from that survival, I think maybe luck isn't the right word." "What's the right word?" someone in the audience called out. Daniel smiled. "I don't know. Grace, maybe. Or providence. Or just the mysterious way that sometimes, for reasons we'll never understand, things work out exactly the way they need to." After the ceremony, Sarah and Daniel stood outside the station, watching the sun set over Bridgeport. "Do you believe in miracles?" Sarah asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I believe in things I can't explain. I've seen too much in this job to dismiss everything as coincidence. But I also know that most of what looks miraculous has rational explanation if you dig deep enough." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." He smiled. "Sarah, I carried you out of that burning house. I felt your weight, saw your face, checked your pulse. That was real, physical, documentable. But was there something else at work? Something that made sure you were positioned where I could find you, that kept you breathing just long enough, that prompted whatever impulse made you or someone call 911 at exactly the right moment?" He shrugged. "I don't know. And I've made peace with not knowing. Sarah nodded slowly. I think I have too. It doesn't really matter whether it was angels or luck or my own survival instinct, I can't remember. What matters is that I'm here and I'm not wasting it. That's the right answer. They stood in comfortable silence. Two people connected by a moment of crisis, by hands that had reached into darkness to pull someone toward light. Sarah thought about all the hands that had helped her over the past year, the doctors, the therapists, the survivors who'd shared their stories, the advocates who'd joined her cause, and yes, the hands she'd felt but couldn't see, carrying her when she couldn't carry herself. Maybe that was the real miracle, not one dramatic moment of supernatural intervention, but the accumulation of small helps, small kindnesses, small interventions that together added up to salvation. She'd been saved by many hands, seen and unseen. And now her hands were reaching out to others, offering help to those who needed it, the circle continuing, the rescue extending forward, the gift being passed along. That felt like grace. That felt like purpose. That felt like exactly what she was supposed to do with this unexpected, inexplicable, precious extra time she'd been given. 2 years after the fire, Sarah's non-profit had grown beyond what she'd imagined. The Fire Survivors Network operated across Connecticut, helping dozens of families annually navigate the aftermath of residential fires. They provided emergency funds, connected people with resources, advocated for policy changes, and most importantly, offered the kind of peer support that only came from people who understood the trauma firsthand. Sarah sat in their small office in downtown Bridgeport, reviewing grant applications with her assistant director, Marcus Chen, Mrs. Jen's grandson, Peter, now 14 and volunteering after school. He'd become fascinated by fire safety after that night, channeling his experience into constructive action. This family lost everything, Marcus said, pointing to an application. House fire in Norwalk, 3 kids. The mother was home. She got everyone out, but they literally have nothing but the clothes they wore. Sarah knew that feeling. Approve emergency funds, connect them with the Red Cross for temporary housing, and let's send them our resource packet. Counseling referrals, insurance navigation, everything. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Sarah Mitchell. Yes? This is Jennifer Walsh from Hartford General Hospital. I'm a social worker here, and we have a patient, Amanda Rodriguez, who was just brought in from a house fire. She's conscious, minor injuries, but she's terrified and alone. Her family is out of state. Someone gave her your organization's number. I know this is a lot to ask, but is there any chance someone could come talk to her? Another survivor? Someone who understands? Sarah looked at her calendar. She had meetings scheduled, deadlines looming. But she remembered lying in that hospital bed, remembered the isolation and fear and uncertainty. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Amanda Rodriguez was 19, a college student renting an apartment in Hartford. The electrical fire had been small, contained quickly, but Amanda had been trapped in her bedroom long enough to be terrified. She sat in the hospital bed, hugging herself, eyes red from crying and smoke. Hi, Amanda. I'm Sarah. I survived a house fire 2 years ago. I heard you might want to talk to someone who gets it. Amanda looked up, and Sarah saw herself 2 years younger in that frightened face. Everyone keeps saying I'm lucky, that it wasn't that bad. But I thought I was going to die in there. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't find the door. You just knew this was it, Sarah finished quietly. That this was how your story ended. Yes, but everyone acts like I should be fine because I'm not hurt badly. But I'm not fine. I'm terrified to go home. I'm terrified to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I smell smoke. Sarah pulled a chair close. Everything you're feeling is normal. The fear, the hypervigilance, the replaying what happened, that's trauma, and it's real even when your physical injuries are minor. You're not being dramatic. You're not overreacting. You almost died, and your brain is processing that. They talked for over an hour. Sarah shared her own experience, the struggles of recovery, the therapy that had helped, the way trauma changed you, but didn't have to define you. She gave Amanda the organization's information, her personal cell number, an invitation to the weekly support group. "Can I ask you something?" Amanda said as Sarah was preparing to leave. "How did you get out? Out of your fire?" Sarah paused. This was always the complicated question. "Firefighters rescued me. I was unconscious when they found me. But how did they know where to find you? How did they get there in time?" "Someone called 911. The firefighters were professionals who knew what they were doing, and I was—" Sarah hesitated. "I was lucky. Lucky in timing, lucky in circumstance, lucky that everything aligned just right." "Do you think it was just luck?" Sarah met Amanda's eyes. "I think I prayed in that room. I prayed harder than I'd ever prayed for anything, and somehow help came. Whether you call that luck, or providence, or the universe responding, I don't know, but I'm grateful for it." Amanda nodded slowly. "I prayed too. I was so scared, and I just kept saying, 'Please, please, help me.' And then the fire alarm went off. It hadn't been working before I'd reported it to my landlord weeks ago. But suddenly it was blaring, and people came, and the fire department came, and I got out. The firefighters said if the alarm hadn't worked, they wouldn't have known where to go in the building." Sarah felt goosebumps. "Your alarm started working during the fire." "I know it doesn't make sense." "The firefighters were confused too. They checked it after. It was old and should have been replaced. There was no reason it should have worked. But it did, right when I needed it to." They looked at each other. Two women connected by trauma and improbable rescue, both carrying stories that didn't quite make rational sense. "I don't think we always get to understand how or why we're saved," Sarah said quietly. "I've spent 2 years trying to figure out exactly what happened the night of my fire. I have theories, rational explanations, ways to account for every element. But underneath all that, I have this feeling, this certainty I can't prove, that I wasn't alone in that room, that when I called out for help, someone heard me." "Angels?" Amanda asked. "Maybe. Or maybe just the mysterious way the universe sometimes works. Maybe it doesn't matter what we call it, as long as we don't waste the gift." After leaving the hospital, Sarah drove to the cemetery where she sometimes went to think. Not to visit a grave, she had no one buried here, but because the quiet space helped her process. She sat on a bench overlooking the grounds and thought about hands. The hands that had carried her from fire. The hands of firefighters, doctors, therapists, friends who'd helped her rebuild. The hands she extended now to others, offering help the way she'd been helped. And maybe, just maybe, other hands too. Hands she couldn't see but had felt. Hands that had positioned her where rescuers could find her, that had prompted that impossible 911 call, that had kept her breathing just long enough. Sarah had never been traditionally religious. She didn't attend church regularly, didn't have strong theological convictions, couldn't quote scripture or doctrine, but she'd come to believe in something she couldn't quite name. A presence, a grace, an underlying current of help available to those who genuinely needed it. Not a vending machine God who dispensed miracles on demand. Not a supernatural intervener who suspended natural law whenever someone prayed hard enough. But something more subtle. A universe that occasionally bent toward help, that created unlikely confluences of circumstance, that ensured people who called out in genuine need might sometimes be heard. She couldn't prove it. Science would say confirmation bias, that she only remembered the helps and forgot the times prayer went unanswered. Skeptics would say coincidence, that in a universe of constant random events, occasionally the randomness favored survival, and they might be right. But Sarah knew what she'd felt. She knew the hands that had carried her had felt different, too strong, too sure, too purposeful to be explained only by adrenaline and professional training. She knew the 911 call from her phone made no medical sense given her level of consciousness. She knew a 12-year-old boy had seen something in her window that shouldn't have been there, and she knew Amanda's broken smoke alarm had started working at exactly the right moment. Were these miracles, divine interventions, angel activity, or just the occasional lucky break in a universe governed by probability and randomness? Sarah had decided it didn't matter what label you used. What mattered was recognizing help when it came, being grateful for it, and passing it forward. She'd been saved. Now she spent her life saving others, not from fires but from the aftermath, from the despair and isolation and trauma that could be as consuming as flames. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Family from Norwalk just called. They're crying. They said thank you. Said this is the first thing that's gone right since the fire. Sarah smiled and typed back, "Good, that's what we're here for." She stood from the bench, looking out over the peaceful cemetery. Somewhere in this city, someone was struggling. Someone was afraid. Someone was calling out for help, whether in formal prayer or desperate internal plea or simple silent wish for things to get better. Sarah couldn't help everyone. She couldn't perform miracles or suspend natural law or guarantee that everyone who prayed would be saved. But she could show up. She could extend her hands, very real, very human hands, to pull people towards safety. She could be part of the answer to someone's desperate prayer, and maybe that was the real miracle. Not supernatural intervention from above, but human compassion reaching across darkness. Not one big dramatic save, but thousands of small helps accumulating into something larger. Sarah had been saved by hands she couldn't see. Now her hands, visible, tangible, very much human, were reaching out to save others. The circle continuing, the rescue extending, the grace being passed along. That felt right. That felt like purpose. That felt like exactly what she was meant to do with this unexpected, precious life she'd been given. 5 years after the fire, Sarah stood at a podium in the Connecticut state capitol, testifying before the legislature about proposed fire safety regulation. Her nonprofit had helped draft the legislation. Mandatory smoke detector inspections in rental properties, updated electrical codes for buildings over 30 years old, better funding for fire departments in underserved communities. In the audience sat Daniel Martinez, now a training coordinator for the State Fire Service. Mrs. Chen had come, bringing Peter, who was now 17 and planning to study fire science in college. Amanda Rodriguez was there, 2 years into her own recovery, volunteering with Sarah's organization. And in the back row, a woman Sarah didn't recognize took notes, watching intently. Sarah concluded her testimony. 5 years ago, I was pulled from a burning house by firefighters who risked their lives to save mine. I survived because people were trained, because equipment worked, because timing aligned. But I also survived because someone, somehow, called for help when I couldn't call for myself. I've spent 5 years trying to understand that night, trying to explain what happened. And what I've learned is this. We don't need to understand miracles to honor them. We honor them by making sure more people survive, by creating systems that protect the vulnerable, by being the help that someone else desperately needs. This legislation will save lives. I'm asking you to pass it not because of what happened to me, but because of what could happen to someone else, someone who deserves the same chance I got. The applause was sustained. After the hearing, as Sarah gathered her materials, the woman from the back row approached. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Claire Thompson. I'm a researcher at Yale studying near-death experiences and unexplained rescues. I've been following your work and I wondered if we could talk about your experience. Over coffee at a nearby cafe, Sarah shared her story, the parts she could verify and the parts that remained mysterious. Claire listened intently, taking notes. What you're describing fits a pattern I've seen in multiple cases, Claire said. Situations where survival shouldn't have been possible, but something intervened. A phone call that shouldn't have been made. A smoke alarm that shouldn't have worked. Positioning that couldn't be explained. The survivors often describe feeling helped by hands they couldn't see. So you think it's real? That something supernatural intervenes? Claire smiled. I think the line between supernatural and natural is blurrier than we assume. Consider, we know prayer and meditation affect brain chemistry. We know that desperate emotional states can trigger unexpected physical responses. We know that human beings have capacities for strength, for survival, for unconscious action that we don't fully understand. So when someone prays desperately and then survives against odds, is that supernatural intervention? Or is it the human mind accessing abilities we haven't mapped yet? That's a very careful non-answer, Sarah said, because I don't have an answer. What I have is data showing that people who believe they were helped, whether by angels, by God, by the universe, or by some unnamed force, those people tend to recover better from trauma. Not because the belief is necessarily true, but because it provides meaning and purpose. You survived, and you believe there was a reason. That belief has driven you to help hundreds of other people. Whether or not your belief is objectively true, it's been subjectively powerful. Sarah considered that. So, it doesn't matter if angels actually carried me out, or if it was just firefighters, and my brain interpreted it strangely because of smoke inhalation and trauma. It matters to you, clearly. But functionally, you're alive, you're helping others. You've created meaning from trauma. Those facts are true regardless of the explanation. That evening, Sarah drove to the old address on Maple Street. The modern house that had replaced hers was now lived in by a family with young children. She could see bikes in the driveway, toys in the yard, life continuing, new stories being written on land where her story had nearly ended. Mrs. Chen came out, as she often did when Sarah visited. She was older now, more frail, but still sharp and kind. "You testified well today," Mrs. Chen said. "Your fire would be proud." "My fire? The one that tried to kill you? If fires could have feelings, yours would be proud that instead of destroying you, it transformed you into someone who helps others." Sarah smiled at the odd sentiment. "Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something? 5 years ago, Peter said he saw someone in my window, someone helping me before the firefighters arrived. Did he really see that, or was it smoke and imagination?" The older woman was quiet for a long moment. "Does it matter what Peter saw? You know what you felt. Those hands that carried you, they were real to you, that's what matters. But I want to know the truth. The truth is you're alive. The truth is you've helped so many people. The truth is that night, however it happened, you were saved. Everything else is details." Sarah walked to where her old house had stood, trying to feel something. Closure, maybe, or final understanding. But she just felt grateful. Grateful for Daniel's expertise, for neighbors who called 911, for doctors who treated her, for the community that had supported her recovery, for the purpose she'd found in helping others. And grateful for the hands, seen or unseen, human or something else, explainable or mysterious, that had reached into darkness to pull her toward light. Her phone rang. "Marcus. Sarah, we have a situation. Family in New Haven, major fire, 2 kids. They're asking for help. I'm on my way." Sarah drove toward New Haven as the sun set, thinking about circles and rescue and grace. She'd been saved so she could save others. Someone had reached out to her, so she reached out to them. The pattern continuing, the gift being passed along. She'd stopped trying to definitively explain what had happened 5 years ago. The medical records, the timelines, the physical evidence, all of it could be rationalized. The feeling of being carried by hands stronger than human, the 911 call from her phone when she was unconscious, the positioning that made her findable, the timing that was just barely enough. All of it could be coincidence. But Sarah had learned that truth was bigger than provable fact. She'd felt what she'd felt. She'd been saved when she shouldn't have been.